Hello everyone, this is NI here, and in today's tutorial I'll teach you how to create this Chinese square pattern in Affinity Designer. This pattern is a traditional Chinese pattern and it represents joy and good fortune. This pattern is made of units that are composed of a large square with a smaller square at its center, and these units repeat themselves horizontally, vertically, and diagonally at a 45-degree angle. As I explained in my previous tutorials, in order to create a pattern for a pattern field in Affinity Designer, we first need to identify the tile that repeats itself throughout the composition. In this particular pattern, identify the following tile that I highlighted with a white square. The key to identifying a pattern for a pattern field is that it must start at the top, where it ends at the bottom, and it must start on the left, where it ends on the right. So this is what we are going to create. And this is what it will look like after we have created and exported it. Alright, so to get started, we go to File, New, and we create a new composition. We give it A5, Orientation Landscape, Document Units to Pixels, and we uncheck Include Margin, and we click on Create. And then we make sure that Snapping, Snap to Grid, Snap to Object Bounding Boxes, and Include Bounding Box Midpoints are enabled. So firstly, we are going to create a dark red background. So we take the rectangle tool, we set the stroke to none, and we set the fill to the following red color, 8B0015. And then we go ahead and we create a large rectangle all over the composition. And then we're going to set up the grid, so we go to View, Grid and Axis, we check on Show Grid, we go to the Basic tab, we leave the spacing as 64 and divisions to 1. We make sure that the grid is in a color that allows it to be seen, and then we click on Close. And then we are going to start drawing the squares, so we take the Pen tool, we set the fill to none, and we are going to set the stroke to gold, so it's going to be the following HTML D6B500. So this is the gold color that we are going to use. And to give it that genuine gold feel, we can give it a bit of noise. So we set the noise to around 25-30%. And we set the stroke width to 1.5. And then we're going to start drawing the first square. So somewhere around here, in the top left of the composition. We go ahead and we create a square of 5 grid units by 5 grid units in dimensions, and we click on Escape. And then we create another square of 1 grid units by 1 grid units at the middle of the larger square. And then we click on Escape again. And then with the Move tool, we select both squares, and we press on Ctrl G to group them together. So this is going to be our first square unit. We are going to need 5 such square units to create the tile. So we press on Ctrl J to duplicate the square unit, and we move it to the right by 8 grid units. So it must be positioned in such a way that there are 3 grid units distance between the 2 square units. And then we select both square units, we press on Ctrl J to duplicate them, and we move them downwards by 8 grid units. So it must be positioned that way, that there must be 3 grid units distance between the 2 squares at the top and the ones at the bottom. And lastly, we need 1 more square unit here. So we select any of the square units, we press on Ctrl J to duplicate it, and we position it here at the middle of all 4 square units. So now the next step is going to be to create the connecting lines that goes through the middle of the square units horizontally and vertically. So we take the Pen tool and we draw a line that goes through the middle of the 2 square units at the top. We take the Move tool, we press on Ctrl J to duplicate it, and we move the duplicated line to the middle of the square unit in the middle. And then we press on Ctrl J to duplicate it again. And the line must be duplicated at the middle of the 2 square units at the bottom. And then we select all 3 lines in the Layers panel. We press on Ctrl G to group them together. And then we press on Ctrl J to duplicate all 3 lines. And then we go here to enable Transform Origin. We set the rotation center at the middle of the square here. And then we set the rotation angle in the Transform panel to 90 degrees. So this rotates the 3 lines by 90 degrees. So now we have all the elements that we need to create the tile. So the tile is going to be located from the middle of this square here to the middle of this square here. And we are going to delineate it with the rectangle tool. So we press on Escape to unselect. We take the rectangle tool, we set the fill and the stroke to none. And then we go ahead and we draw a rectangle from the middle of this square here to the middle of this square here. And then we select the rectangle. We make sure that it is positioned correctly. So it must really go through the middle. Alright, so now it is positioned correctly, and we can export what's within the square. So we go to File, Export. We set the file type to PNG and area to selection area to export only what's within the square. And then we click on Export. Alright, so now that we have exported the tile, we can use it to do a pattern fill. So we go to File, New, we create a new composition. We can uncheck Show Grid. We take the rectangle tool and we set the fill and the stroke to none. And then we go ahead and we draw a rectangle all over the composition. We select the rectangle in the Layers panel. We take the Vector Fold Fill tool, we go to Set Bitmap Fill. And we select the tile that we just created. And we click on the composition, and this creates a pattern fill with the pattern. And then we can adjust the handles to make it bigger or smaller. And also we can rotate it by 45 degrees by holding Shift. I think this pattern also looks good like this at a 45 degrees orientation. Alright, so that was it for this tutorial. We learned how to create a Chinese square pattern in Affinity Designer. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and learned something from it. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Affinity Designer tutorials in the future. And until then, see you next time, bye!